I'm Nick from the Producer School and welcome back to our channel. Today we are unlocking 5 bass patterns that have shaped your favorite hard house and trance tracks over the year. We'll explore each pattern in depth and I will show you some examples of real tracks that have used them. I will explain you when and how to use them and then demonstrate that in FL Studio right away. So after this video you will really master all of these bass lines. Before starting this video, I just want to mention that we have just put out a really sick hard house and trance producer pack, and if you want to find all the details you can go to the link in the description. It contains project files, Serum 2 presets, samples, vocals and much more. But enough talking, let's dive straight into the video. First of all, we're diving into the classic Offbeat or so-called Donk Baseline. This might be one of the, if not the most common patterns across the genres. And I have this example right here, which is a track by Luft, and it's called Breaking My Heart. And that perfectly demonstrates what the Offbeat bassline sounds like. As you can hear right away for this first bass pattern, simplicity is really the key and the strength of this pattern. So as you can see, I made this rhythm myself, which sounds like this. Let's dive into the piano roll to show you why this bass is so effective. So as the name says, on every offbeat you will play a single note. And this creates a perfect call and response between the kick and the bass. There are not much bass patterns that offer you a more clean interaction between your kick and your bass. So right here you have space for your kick, and then in between the first kick and the other kick you will have your bass line, and they basically just perfectly complement each other. For this to be the most effective, you should definitely pay attention to your kick length as well as your bass length. Ideally, you don't want your kick length to be longer than your first 2 steps, because then you will create overcomplication and the bass and the kick will play at the same time. But on the other hand, the same goes for the bass. If you give it too much release or make it too long and you will make it overlap with the transient of your kick, that will cause problems in your mix as well. And make sure that it is cut off before the other kick hits. Ideally, you use this rhythm if you have certain elements such as vocals or leads that require a lot of space, because this bass line itself is really predictable, and that way you can complement it with, for example, a vocal or a lead sound. So next we basically have a variation on the first one, and it's called the double offbeat. And the example I have for this is the Kiki remix of Don't You Want Me, which sounds like this. So I made my own variation of it again, which sounds like this. So essentially what you're doing is you take the offbeat bass that we just discussed and you split it in 2. So instead of just hitting on the 3rd and the 7th, you hit on the 3rd and the 4th and the 7th and the 8th and so on. Basically it just continues as long as you want. And the main thing that I think is good to realize when you're choosing between the normal offbeat and this double offbeat bass is that this one is way more energetic and driving, but it also leaves a bit less space for other elements. So I think it's interesting to show you the difference between the 2 elements so you can see the contrast. So it's almost the same. Looking at them together, the first one will sound slower compared to the second one, even though it's a really small change and we're in the same BPM. Just demonstrates without any other elements on it that your track will get way more energetic and driving. It's the same bass sound, the same kick, the same top loop, totally changes the energy of the track. So that's the second bass, which is a really effective one, and me personally, I think I prefer it over the first one. Then next we're looking into a very classic bass rhythm, which is the 1/16 rolling rhythm, and I have this track from DJ Heartstring, which is called I've Been Meaning to Tell You, which perfectly demonstrates it. And once again, I've made my own variation on it right here to demonstrate it in the piano roll, which sounds like this. Essentially, we can consider this bass line a third variation on the first two that I showed you, and this one can be more categorized as one of the really essential trance bass patterns, as this one is used a lot also in the old school trance sound. So looking at the bass pattern itself, it's really straightforward. It basically just hits on every 1/16th note, which gives you the most drive that you can achieve in a bass line. However, when you use this bass line sidechain, a non-negotiable effect. For the first two, basically sidechain matters less because you basically already do it yourself. However, for this bass, if you don't add sidechain, it will clash massively with your kick. The sidechain is really useful because here you can really choose yourself how pumping and driving you want the bass to be. So for example, let's put it like this. You will have it really driving like this. Which is a choice and it can work, so there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure your kick is not too long because then it will clash again. However, if we drag it more like this, kind of get back to the sound that we just discussed, which was the double offbeat bass. The point is with this is you can then slightly move it more to the left so you get a bit more of drive. So even though it's almost the same, you can play around with it a little bit. If you're using sidechain, you can use these presets. So basically the sidechain here gives you full control on the sound you want to achieve. Next we have the bass pattern I call Octave Jump, which I want to demonstrate with this Marlon Hofstad track called Call Me. So as the name already suggests, it's really straightforward. It's a bass line on one note, jumping up and down on an 1/8 rhythm. So I will demonstrate you that right here with this sound. And as you can see, it's really straightforward. On every 1/8 there's a note and you just switch back and forth between the low and high notes. This creates some kind of variation, and for the listener it even feels like you add more harmonics, but considering it's the same notes, you're not really adding them. You just give a sense to the listener that something is changing, which can really contribute to like energy and having a more euphoric sound in your drop. Like if you would just put the rhythm like this, it would feel way more dark, and this kind of gives you way more of an uplifting sound. For this, you also need to sidechain since the first notes are hitting right on the kick. However, if you choose the right sound, you can even add some glide. It will still make a huge difference to have these first notes included. It really creates that jumping effect between the bass. Last but not least, I have this track called I Need You by Carl Starkey, which is the perfect demonstration of a syncopated rhythm in hard house. So basically this is the point where you just prioritize groove and start messing around with the offbeats. So I created this little pattern. As you can hear immediately, it's way more groovy, and that's because we're utilizing syncopation, so we're using the offbeats to create groove. For this bass line you have way more creative freedom. However, I would recommend to kind of take the rhythm for the first bar and then just repeat it, because otherwise it would get too complex and listeners have a really hard time following it. But if you just repeat like a groovy bass line every bar, you will really get listeners into the groove, and at some point they will really like it. But if you repeat this, you will really get people into a groove and into a swing, and it can work really, really well. But for example, for this you have way more freedom. I could like right on the spot create another syncopated bass line. A lot will work. It's just also for me at least a matter of messing around. And I would recommend this bass line if you're trying to create a really groovy hard house track. For example, when you add like a step or some piano groove on top of it, this one works really, really well. So I hope you guys like this overview of the 5 essential hard house and trance bass patterns. I feel like if you didn't know about these yet and you're aspiring to make this kind of music, it can be really, really helpful. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, make sure to leave a comment down below and I will try to answer them all. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you can check out our new pack Ignite, which contains all kind of sounds that I used in the video. You can check it out in the link in the description. For now, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I see you guys in the next video.